Hey everybody, so it's time for NHL Games of the Week, where I take a look ahead at the upcoming week in the NHL and decide which games I think will be the best and most exciting to watch. Before we get into the video, I just quickly want to remind everyone to please like and subscribe if you haven't already. That greatly helps out the channel and is much appreciated. So, we're looking at the week starting today, Sunday, January 5th, going until Saturday, January 11th. And let's get right into it. Not a ton of huge games this week, certainly not like last week where we had a lot on this list. But we do have a few real good games to talk about. So let's start with today, the Sunday the 5th. We have Tampa Bay versus Carolina. Those are two teams that are very close to each other in the standings. Obviously, they're in different divisions, but Carolina and Tampa Bay both kind of, on the cusp. They're both in playoff positions, but near the bottom half of the playoff positions. So Carolina being a wild card team, Tampa Bay being the last team in the Atlantic. That's a big 2 points on the line, to say the least, and that should be a really fun game to watch between two very good teams. So, Tampa's turned it on recently. Carolina's been solid all year long, and I think that's going to be a real fun game to watch. Also tonight, Calgary versus Minnesota, and this is an interesting one because Calgary and Minnesota, even though they're not in the same division, this is a very important game because they are the first two teams outside the playoffs in the Western Conference. Calgary is outside of the playoffs by 1 point. Minnesota is outside of the playoffs by 3 points. So this is a big game, and whoever wins that, that's an important win for whichever team can win that. Now, Calgary has been in and out of the playoffs all year long. They've been one of those bubble teams pretty much all year. Minnesota, it's kind of surprising that they've stuck around the way that they have, but they are very, very quietly still in position to possibly make the playoffs this year. Only a few points out, and they've hung around a lot better than I thought they would. And they started the season really, really badly, but they've played better as the year's gone along, and now they're still in the mix as far as the West is concerned. So that's definitely a big game between the Flames and Wild, and whoever wins that is going to get a nice boost in the standings for sure, as far as being right on that line goes. Moving on, tomorrow I have none for Monday. There's only a few games and nothing really stuck out. So we move on to Tuesday the 7th, and we have Philadelphia versus Carolina. That is a big game between the two current wild card teams in the Eastern Conference. Carolina's wild card 1, Philadelphia's wild card 2, and they're obviously that's a huge game as far as positioning goes and points go in the East. So not only do they play in the same division, there's huge wild card points on the line here as well. So that is a massive game. Wednesday, the 8th, we have a nice Metro Division rivalry matchup between Washington and Philadelphia. Obviously, whenever these teams meet, it's usually a really fun game to watch. Washington's the best team in the East, and have been pretty much all year. They've looked absolutely outstanding. Philadelphia, second wild card team right now, not playing all that well recently. They're definitely going to be looking to try and hang on to a playoff spot, and that's not necessarily going to be easy with the way that they've been playing lately. It's certainly not been an easy road for them the last couple of weeks, and they've lost 3 in a row now, and they're only 5-5 in their last 10 games. So, big measuring stick game for the Flyers for sure there, to see them up against a team as good as the Capitals. Let's see, moving on now, we have Thursday the 9th. We got a couple games to talk about on the 9th. First, we have Nashville versus Chicago. And now neither of those teams are in a playoff spot right now. However, Nashville still does have potential to get back in. Chicago's pretty much out of it. But this is just a good Central Division rivalry. Whenever the Blackhawks and Predators play, it's usually a physical game. It's usually a pretty nasty game. They're definitely two teams that don't like each other a whole lot. So even though neither of the teams have been all that great this season, it is a big game, particularly for the Predators, who need that win. It's also a good rivalry matchup between two teams that are really have a decent amount of animosity between them, and play important and exciting games against each other. And also that night we have Minnesota versus Calgary playing for the second time this week. Obviously we talked about them playing back tonight. They also play on Thursday night. Obviously, all the same things apply. Huge points on the line there. They're the first two teams outside the playoffs picture in the West, so they both need as many points as they can get, and this series between them could be a real big boost, or I don't know, whatever the opposite of that is, really hurt them in the standings if they end up losing both of these games. So, obviously two huge games there for those teams. Moving on to Friday, the 10th, we've got nothing, no games of the week on Friday. So Saturday, finish it off with a few on Saturday. Saturday's got a pretty decent schedule. First, Boston versus the New York Islanders. Obviously, two of the top teams in the Eastern Conference, Boston leading the Atlantic. New York has actually dropped down to third in the Metro because New York has not been playing very well recently, while Pittsburgh continues to roll along. The Islanders, I do think, will get back on track at some point, and they're not going to go anywhere. Just two very good teams that usually play good, tight games against each other. So Boston versus New York should be a fun one. Tampa Bay versus Philadelphia. Just teams that desperately need points. Tampa Bay's at 50 points right now, holding the last playoff spot in the Atlantic. Philadelphia, as we talked about, is the second wild card team right now at 49 points. They've got teams coming up right trying to catch them, particularly Florida, Columbus, and Buffalo. So, that's an important game. And even though it's not a divisional game, it's a very important game for two teams that need points. And lastly, Edmonton versus Calgary, Battle of Alberta, one of the top rivalries in the history of the NHL. Obviously now these are important games. Last season when Edmonton stunk, these weren't really, that important. Now you've got Edmonton in a playoff spot, Calgary the first team out of a playoff spot. Not only is that a massive rivalry, there's a huge 2 points on the line. So that is one of the absolute top games this week, without a doubt. So that's it. Those are my games of the week for this week in the NHL. Not as many as last week, but there are still some really important matchups and a lot of games where both teams are going into the game desperately needing the 2 points. So should be a fun week. Hopefully you get the chance to watch some of those. I know I'll be watching as many as I can. Like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description below. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.